not the snail mail. I was talking to a client in my Align CFO mentorship, and I was away, and she was panicking because her tax bill of $10,000 was due. And guess what? She didn't have the money. She did have the money, but she didn't have the money in her tax money bucket. And she didn't know what to do. And she was panicking. She's like, well, if I don't pay it, I'm gonna have to pay interest. I don't want to pay interest. And you ever think about like what you don't want to pay? Like, who wants to pay taxes? Said no one ever. And these are some of the conversations we're having in our community, the smell of money. The smell of money is all about how we think, feel, and yes, how we smell money. Because if you think about your senses dictate the actions that you take to get the results that you want to make the money decisions that you have. Just sit with that for a minute, right? So, in the smell of money, we do this money awareness challenge where we're paying attention to how we feel when we get to pay the bills. Now, if you know anything about entrepreneurship, you know you're setting up money buckets for your business account. And one of those money buckets is your tax account. But are you keeping the money in there, or do you keep taking it out, panicking because you feel like you don't have enough? If this is you, join the community, The Smell of Money. The link is in the show notes. Today, we are going to be talking with Kristen Swan, who is a former business coach turned life and spiritual guide. She helps people discover their truth, clarify their values, and cultivate a curious, intentional mindset. And I know a lot of you listeners out there are like, yes, this is what I've been trying to focus on. Through her journal and workshops, she empowers others to make aligned choices and embrace the power of their own stories. And you know, when you make the aligned choice, it feels good. It lights you up. Thank you so much, Kristen, for being here. Tell us about this journey. I mean, it's a big switch. Former business coach to a spiritual guide. I mean, most business coaches would be like, I'm not doing spiritual woo woo.
I know, I know. Oh my goodness, it has been a journey and it really I've got to back up a little bit because I have been through so many twists and turns professionally and so much of my kind of early professional life was really a reaction to my money story, right?
Mm,
It was a, and I use the word reaction specifically because I grew up in this very kind of on, it was funny because it showed up in different ways, but on both sides, both my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family, there was a real scarcity mentality that was this generational, kind of inherited scarcity mentality. And on my mom's side, it was kind of always, is there enough money for rent? Is there enough money for the groceries? Very immediate needs. And on my dad's side, it was more about, there was money, but it it was having my grandparents specifically having grown up in the depression, which made a significant, you know impression on how they thought about money. And and so it was always kind of this saving and this reusing of everything, which I love. I love the idea of fixing things and reusing what you can. But it was, they both were really based on the idea that there was, either there wasn't enough in the moment or there wasn't going to be enough at some point in
mm,
time. And so from that, I started working for, doing little jobs as a kid at around 12. So I was very entrepreneurial and I was identifying that my neighbors, were going to go away for vacation. So can I pick up their mail? Can I water their plants? That kind of thing. And so I was always very good at finding work. I never had any shortage of work. And I would I would make money and I could save money. That wasn't a problem. And I also think I was very clear about the things that I wanted to spend money on. I wasn't, I knew what mattered to me in terms of how I spent money. But bigger picture, I was always carrying this sense of there isn't enough, or there at some point there won't be enough. And so rather than thinking long term and kind of big scale, it narrowed my focus to what I thought I could do professionally. And it kept me playing very small and really kind of taking work that was right in front of me, because again, kind of scarcity, right? If I don't take what's right in front of me, it's going to be gone and there won't be that next thing. And so I never was taking the time to say, you know, what is it that really lights you up, right? Or what is it that really is a great combination of your skill set, or what is a skill that you want to develop um, to a greater extent. So I just was kind of running from job to job, right?
Mhm.
And in the meantime, I also would find myself doing do taking on these positions because people would say to me, "Oh, you're really good at this." And so again, I was not checking in with myself. And so I would end up doing things that, yeah, I was good at it, but just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you need to do it,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
So, finally, I slowed down enough to realize that business coaching was something that I felt passionate about, because I really wanted to support other people, and primarily women, in developing their definition of success and what
Mhm.
that looked like. And my work with my clients was mostly with people who were founders and owners of their own independent, smaller businesses. And as we know, there is not this super clear, like, oh, this is your professional life and this is your personal life. When you own a business, and when you are the the you're the back office and the front office and the outside office and the sales office, it's all of you. And what I observed was my business owners saying that they wanted certain things and setting goals, having that big vision for what they wanted to achieve and kind of what they were trying to build, and acting in ways that were either directly harmful to getting, advancing those things that they had identified that they said, I want, or just kind of taking them sideways, right?
Mhm.
And so and there didn't seem to be a real awareness. And I just thought, what is something that I can do that will help my clients at this point, my business clients, business coaching clients, develop a habit of discernment, meaning get to understand their own patterns, their own choices, their behaviors. And a big part of that is driven by their own money story. So, of course, when you can see it in somebody else, you probably have a bit of that happening in your own life. And sure
Mhm.
enough, I in my personal life, um, I was repeating some patterns that really did not serve me in any way, shape, or form. So the journal that essentially came out of that is Spaghetti on the Wall, and it is something that works for I mean, it can work for people who own their own business. It can work for people who work for other people. It can work for people who have other pursuits, but
Mm.
it is, and so I think the transition that I was able to make from that business coaching to, let's say, more spiritual guide, life coach, is really recognizing that this foundational piece of having awareness around our choices, our patterns, and then also, are we doing this because we don't know each other or know ourselves, or are we doing this because it's an old story that we're carrying around? So I just felt like, kind of, this is this is the starting place, whether you want to be a successful business person or just have a life that has more joy and contentment.
Hmm. And that's such a beautiful journey. I know so many listeners out there they're misaligned. They're doing things because they feel like they have to. I had a sales call with someone. I host a monthly Comcast Flow workshop and other people's membership communities. And in one of the communities, I was sharing that the stories that we tell ourselves about money and how misaligned we are. And then we wonder why we're not hitting our profit margin goals. And,
Mhm.
like, no one's tracking their KPIs, but this one woman in particular really wanted support, and she felt like her business wasn't kicking off, so she was interviewing for positions, in corporate, and she was miserable, and she's like, "I don't wanna do this, but, my savings is starting to dwindle, and the business isn't kicking off the way I thought to. It started off really well," and she just went through this circle of emotions, and her whole energy was so drained, and you could tell him, like, I don't really think the corporate world is your answer. It's not going to produce the results that you desire because it's not in alignment. And she couldn't wrap her head around that. All she could see was, I used to make money, and I thought, but why did you stop? And when you can come to that realization and have that peace, it's a wow. It's like the sunshine and rainbows and unicorns and rainbows, I guess is what they say. But it is, you know that when you're in alignment, your face lights up and everything is like, wow, this is so great. But especially as women, we get really scared to go there because what if we make that mistake? What if it's really not the thing? What if, and all these external voices come through? So, what is one way that you help work through that? And what was your journey like when you were working through that, as far as the tools and it's something that you may have held on to that really got you through that, I guess, that turning point?
Yeah. Well, I think that it does start with that willingness to pause, right? That willingness to kind of slow down. And I mean, especially if you are a business owner, and in particular, if you are feeling the stress of finances, or or any kind of lack, whether it's clients or whatever your business is, there is most of us are thinking, I've got to work harder, right? So there's nothing in our upbringing or our body that says this is a good time to hit pause, right? That this is a good time for reflection. It's like, oh gosh, I need to be running harder, faster, and smarter, and all these things, right? Whew.
Hmm.
Okay. And I just want to acknowledge that it's not going to feel comfortable. And the place to start is just saying, okay, I've got to, I, let me take, even if you take 15 minutes, and let me just sit and kind of think about where I am. Let me kind of, one thing that is really helpful sometimes is just doing a brain dump of
Mm,
kind of every thought that is, because
yeah.
I think that too often we can't get to the here because we've got all of this. So, you know, start with that brain dump. Just write down everything. And I think that writing, I am a big, big, big believer in pen to paper, pencil to paper,
Mhm.
marker, whatever you
Yeah.
want to use, because it is such a grounding
Mhm.
kind of exercise, because if you're writing something, you're not, it's very difficult for you to be on your phone. It's very difficult for you to be driving. It's very difficult, right? And you have to slow down. It forces you to slow down, because our thoughts can be going a million miles an hour in our head. However, our hand is not going to write a million miles an hour.
Right.
So it's going to slow you down just by kind of the physical constraint as to how quickly you can write. So do that brain dump. Just put every thought that you're having. It can be, this is not, and do not censor yourself here. I think that is a big part of the pause that I'm really recommending, is put down every icky thought, every scary thought, every thought that you're thinking, oh gosh, I don't want to name this because I don't want to give energy to it. And I don't want to, just get it all out, right?
Mhm.
And then let's like sit back with yourself. And I think that for the entrepreneurs out there, it's kind of come back to yourself and get curious with, what is it that you are doing? Like,
Mhm.
what is your thing that you're doing? Let's just kind of get back to some basics. And I think that there are some great ways to journal about that, and kind of name the thing that you're doing. You can name your whys around what you're doing it, and also give yourself some space. I think the other thing too is, when we're anxious and when we're in that lack mentality, everything's tight, right? We're
Mhm.
just like, oof, it's, your chest is tight, your breathing is more shallow, you've got that stress in your neck. Just like, allow yourself even to kind of do the daydreaming about where it is that you want to go. And then I think the next thing that I love to do is, I think it's very important to kind of understand, if you can, ask yourself the question of, where do you think the obstacles are, right?
Mhm.
And kind of name what those challenges are. And some of them are going to be external, and some of them are going to be kind of universal, right? It could be time. It could be, I mean, I think that any kind of resource, right? Whether it's our own ability, or the amount of time we have, or the amount of money, all of those kind of those resources, that, so kind of flesh those out where you see your obstacles.
Mhm.
And then I think it's so important to create both. I love what you're doing with your different groups, because being in community is so important, right?
Mhm.
And sharing with other people. So I think that there is a piece of that, um, that I would recommend for everyone to incorporate, whether it's your own kind of board of directors, joining a group that's already in existence, or somehow, and also creating actionable steps. And it's all about really identifying the smallest step that you can take,
Mhm.
you know, in first in this moment, and then building on that. But we do such a number on ourselves, because we just will get so ahead of ourselves. We'll get we don't stay present. And I think
Right.
that's the whole thing that I'm saying about the pause, and really checking in with yourself, and allowing yourself to breathe, and to kind of get some more expansiveness into your body and your thought processes.
Yeah, and it's so important to get out of our head and into our heart. I think in the Wealth Accelerator, we do brain dumps, where we meet weekly for a group called Profit Goldmine, and we really get into those thoughts and expose them. And the power of writing. I say pencil and paper because then you have the earth elements, but you're so right. You're directed, and you just start writing, and things flow, and then you're realizing, wow, I didn't realize that was a blocker. And once we can identify those blockers, then we can move forward and come up with a solution. And I think a lot of
Hmm.
times we get stuck because we don't give ourselves grace. We don't want to take the time to write. I don't want anyone to see what I wrote. Well, then rip it up and burn it when you're done. But getting it out on pen and on paper is one of the key ways to release it and to discover what is keeping you from doing what you want to do. And I know, myself included, a lot of my clients were all people pleasers. And when you're
Hmm.
constantly focused on taking care of others, you put yourself on the back burner and nothing gets done. And then you're depleted because you're not serving from a cup that overflows. And then you wonder why your business isn't successful. And I'm sure you've
Yeah.
seen a lot of that as a business coach, where, I think that's a great, recipe for burnout, because we're constantly focused on the business, but not on ourselves. And
Right.
I'm in a group on school where we're working with new business owners, and there's resident experts in the group, and we all have our own expertise that we're bringing to the table. And the one thing I was telling the entrepreneurs, that non-negotiable: take care of yourself first, take me time. And you would not believe the comments of women who don't even know what me time is. And that was
Yeah.
me until my youngest was 14. He's now 28 as the recording of this. And I think, what, I can't take me time. I can't do this. And I was actually reading a post on, I don't know, Instagram or Facebook, about how a mom was feeling deserted by her adult children. It was her birthday, and
Mm.
they waited till 9 o'clock at night to call her. And her whole life was centered on her kids, that she didn't even realize she wasn't enjoying her own life. And who am I? Like, who am
Yeah.
I as this person who was created and designed by God to do great things, but was so focused on taking care of everyone else? They're like, now you're by yourself, and I don't know what to do. And finding that alignment is so key. So I love that you put together this beautiful service that you've gotten to experience, and now you can share others to do it. So what is the one thing that you wish you would have done differently, that you could share with the audience, that maybe they can say, oh yeah, I'm going to do that differently now so that I don't do that and repeat that same mistake?
Yeah, I do think that I agree with you in small ways, just making sure that you are making time for yourself and taking care of yourself is so important because I don't, I mean, I was flashing different memories were coming through as you were describing that, right? I have 3 young adult children, and I was divorced when they were young, and I carried a lot of guilt around. I initiated the divorce, which meant that I then felt like not only did I have kind of the regular mom guilt, but I also had the added thing of like trying to be even better because I had really disrupted their life in a very significant and painful way. So I do think that that bit of self-care every day is so important. And the other thing that I would do differently, is when I first made the switch to go into business coaching, I was coming from, a over a decade-long career in, landscape design and also, designing other spaces, and it was funny because it was something I had started because somebody told me I was good at it, and I liked it well enough, but it wasn't my, raison d'être, and it it was I was good enough, and I liked working with my clients and things like that, so it was not in by any stretch a horrible time of my life. So, and then when I knew that I didn't want to do that thing anymore, I was so timid about making the switch to business coaching, which I did feel like was so much more of a calling for me. And I was timid because I felt like people were going to judge me. And I thought that I was so worried about what everyone else was going to think. And I, so I kind of straddled both for a while, which completely and utterly messed with it messed with launching a successful, getting out of the gate in a much stronger position of this, starting this career as a business coach. It kind of left me in this weird, netherland of still kind of trying to work with my other clients. And I mean, it diluted here I was working in some ways twice as hard. However, it diluted the impact and really my ability to be what I knew I could be. And this is all because I was so worried about what people were going to say.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's 99% of our listeners.
And people are still going to say stuff. I mean, people are going to say stuff. Okay.
Yeah, and that's on them. We always think
Yeah.
it's about us, and it's not about us. And
No.
and so when we think about, like, everybody has their own set of thoughts and their own experiences and whatever they're going through, that's the best decision for them at their time, but it really has nothing to do with us. But we tend to absorb everything and think, oh, what did I do wrong? And I have to fix it. And then before you know it, we go off on this tangent, and our business doesn't get paid attention to. We don't get paid
No.
attention to. And then we're exhausted. And then we start this whole cycle again. And it's so important to stop and pause. And like you said, do that brain dump and just get those thoughts out of your head. You could do it for 5 minutes, you could do it for 30 minutes, but just do
Right.
it. And when you get into the habit of doing it once a day, and it's like, wow. And you
Oh my
start to think
gosh.
clear. You start to see
Yes.
things in a new perspective. So I love that. So tell us, how do you work with people? Like, who's your target audience, and what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
Oh, well, everything that I do is on my website, so kristenswan.com, and there are copies of my journals available, which I think are such a great way to get to this place they're a great way to have a pause there's some prompts and directions, so I'm not leaving you, hanging there. So you can find the journals there. There's also some really great workbooks that are more specific, and then I also do workshops and retreats. So all of that information is at the website.
Beautiful. Well, you guys heard it. You got to go to kristenswan.com, get those journals, start doing those prompts, start writing. I'm telling you, you want clarity, you want alignment, get out of your head and into your heart. Check out
Yeah.
Kristen, see if the retreats, we were thinking about doing a retreat, a wealth retreat, and thinking about how much time do you need to spend just to be with yourself so you can connect with your money, so that you can connect in alignment. And this is something that you can look into, and I'm sure Kristen has some wonderful retreats that you might find helpful for you, because remember, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it's what you do with it.